It's time for today's Lucky Land horoscope with Victoria Cash.
Life's gotten mundane, so shake up the daily routine and be adventurous with a trip to Lucky Land. You know what they say, your chance to win starts with a spin. So go to LuckyLandSlots.com to play over 100 social casino-style games for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. Get lucky today at LuckyLandSlots.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome back to Rams Up, your favorite LA Rams podcast. We are part of the Fans First Sports Network. You can follow us on our YouTube channel as well at LA Rams Up. I'm your host, Mark. I'll be joined occasionally by my football gurus, Paul and Ian. Let's get to it. Welcome back, everybody. Episode 510 of Rams Up. Hopefully you caught my quick reaction video on the YouTube channel yesterday afternoon following the game. Rams lose to the Texans 17-15 in their preseason finale. I'm going to pile on and add on to that here, rehashing some of those notes. There were 8 players that I had on my 53-man roster that played in that game, calling into question how accurate that was. Now, I wasn't necessarily predicting a 53-man roster, just trying to demonstrate the challenges, but Sean Jolly played a lot, not a good sign for him. Jalen McCullough played a little bit, I think, early in the game. He's on this roster. Corey Durden and Carlos Watkins both played extensively, and that may mean Deshaun Johnson's on this roster, actually, and maybe Watkins and Durden make it. One of them anyways. My money would be on Corey Durden. I think that's still a question mark, the interior of that defensive line. O'Shawn Mathis played a little bit, saw him on special teams mostly, I think. Hey, you can't bench everybody. I think he makes this roster. I don't understand why Boston Scott was out there if he's on this roster. Hey, maybe it's Zach Evans that's on this roster. They signed Sir Roderick Thompson, the running back. He got 3 carries in the fourth quarter. I don't know. I talked about this going into the game. I don't know what the Rams are doing at the running back position after the top 3 guys. We'll find out Tuesday, I suppose. Brennan Jackson finally played. I think he's on this roster for sure. They had to get him out there for a few snaps. He's finally healthy. Just get him warmed up, so to speak, for the regular season. He'll likely be a rotational special teams guy anyways. Xavier Smith, probably the biggest surprise, played pretty much the entire game, and I had him penciled in on the 53, thinking the Rams are going to carry 7 wide receivers. Maybe not. I just see so much value in what he brings to the team at the wide receiver position and returning kicks. He can run the ball a little bit too on jet sweeps and such. So don't know what the Rams are doing there either. So I'm probably going to be wrong on a handful of guys on this 53-man roster I came up with. Probably the biggest slight I had at this point, Deshaun Johnson. Unless he was dinged up and couldn't play, he's on this 53-man roster. Now, the biggest issue the Rams are facing is at the tackle position. We learned, based on what Les Snead said, maybe Rob Havenstein's not ready to go in Detroit on opening night. Man, I sure hope so. Alaric Jackson suspended for 2 games. So you're looking at Joseph Noteboom and Warren McClendon starting left and right tackle. Maybe you flip them. I don't know. But who's their backup? If Rob can't go, they're going to have to carry someone like AJ or Curry or bring someone in off the waiver wire after Tuesday. But I guess we really just have to hope Rob Havenstein can go. This is a pretty good Detroit defense. Got to keep Matthew Stafford upright, especially since our backup will indeed be Stetson Bennett. This based on Les Snead's other comment, hey, we're not going to go out and sign a veteran quarterback that's unfamiliar with our system, spend resources getting him ready to potentially back up for 2 games, be the backup to Matthew Stafford for 2 games. No, we're going to ride with Stetson Bennett. So that is another thing we learned during this preseason game. And a follow-on to those roster discussions, Larrell Murchison, if he's healthy, is he on this roster? He is one of the guys that could go on that 4-week injured reserve, designated for return list. And if Sean Jolly's playing that whole game, does that mean Josh Wallace or Charles Woods has made this roster? If they played very little. I did not see Josh Wallace out there at all. Still waiting for the snap counts. So maybe I will revise my position on that when I see that. Prior to the game, I also published my Fearsome 4 wish list to take off on my Fearsome 4 keys to the game. The 4 things I wanted to see in this game, and you know what? I struck out. Didn't see a single one. Well, one of them maybe. Get to that in a second. The first thing I wanted to see was Stetson Bennett show some accuracy. Well, hard to show your accuracy when you're on the sideline the entire game. The second thing I wanted to see was improved performance from our special teams, namely Ethan Evans and Joshua Carty. Carty hits a field goal, misses an extra point. Ethan Evans kind of off and on. He had a couple good punts, but he had a couple that I was not impressed with. Did hit his placement kicks pretty well, I think. But I wouldn't say I feel any better about our punter and kicker today than I did going into this game. And I wanted to see some sacks and takeaways just to develop that personality on defense. The Texans muffed a kick. The Rams recovered it. I don't know if that counts. And they had a dropped interception by the linebacker Neal. And I wouldn't call Jason Taylor's drop a drop. It was deflected, hit him in the upper chest. Not going to call that a drop. Had an opportunity there, though. But these are second and third stringers, so not a big loss, but I wouldn't say I saw what I wanted to see either. And I wanted them to sit everybody, pretty much. Did they sit the guys they needed to sit? Well, we'll see. It'll make sense on Tuesday night. We'll revisit this. Still some oddities, I think, in the guys we're seeing on the field and how that aligns with a 53-man roster, unless it's telling us exactly what we think it's telling us, and we're just going to be surprised. Some of these guys that played are going to end up getting cut. Omar Spates and Jacob Hummel did not play, and we learned before the game that they're basically inked in onto this 53-man roster. Another thing, I wish our insiders would be sharing with us on a regular basis before these games that Brennan Jackson was going to play, that Hummel and Spates will not. This is really useful information to us diehard Ram fans that can't get to the practices, that aren't sitting in on these press conferences, aren't talking to these coaches. A lot of information isn't getting to us, in my opinion. Hey, we have some great insiders. I just think they can do a lot better. But Spates and Hummel on the roster for inside linebackers, of course, that means we're going to get dinged in another position group, because last year we carried 3 for most of the season. So should the Rams have run Joshua Carty out there to kick that extra point, to make it a 1-point game at the end there, or should they have gone for 2? I think they should have gone for 2. I think they should have ran a bootleg. Hey, don't we always want them to run a bootleg? Seems like it, or just run the ball. But that didn't work. Didn't think Dresser Wynn was going to be able to convert there, just dropping back and trying to find a receiver. Run a bootleg, tie the game up, go home with a tie. Now, once they did not get the tie, should they have called some timeouts? My special assistant wanted to see that. He just wants more football. I don't know why. I was ready for this game to be over, but I was okay with them just letting the clock run out, take the 2-point loss. Now, if you run Carty back out there to kick that extra point and he misses it, well, where does that leave you? I don't know. To be quite honest with you, I didn't even want to see it. Now, there's always people questioning the Rams' approach of sitting starters and other teams playing them. 2 different schools of thought. Well, the 49ers may have lost 2 starters, probably briefly, Leonard Floyd and their other defensive end, Gross Matos, both suffering knee injuries. They don't look to be serious, but still not good. And another injury news, the Cowboys have lost starting cornerback, all-pro cornerback, Deron Bland, undergoing foot surgery. Now, that didn't occur during a game. It happened at camp in Oxnard. That's a big hit for the Cowboys. Could be out 6 to 8 weeks. Go over some stats for that game. Not pretty for Dresser Wynn. 9 for 16 for 72 yards. Zach Evans, 14 carries for 45 yards. Boston Scott, 11 for 34 yards. Thompson had those 3 carries for 6 yards. And that aforementioned Xavier Smith led the way with 4 receptions for 34 yards. Also had 3 rushes for 16 yards. So like I say, Xavier Smith, a real weapon on offense and special teams. On defense, Neal and Fatukasi, the linebackers, led the way, 7 and 8 tackles respectively. Tanner Engel had 6. That's combined solo and assists. Rams managed just 193 total yards. Texans racked up 329. Back in a second, we'll talk about each of the Rams position groups and then some game balls and some closing thoughts. So let's run down how we feel about these position groups one by one here and what questions we have regarding each group. Quarterback, well, we have a great starter, kind of questionable backup at this point till Jimmy comes back, but we know what this unit's going to look like. Running back, who's the 4th running back? Assuming there's going to be a 4th one. There has to be. Who is it? My money's on Boston Scott. Wide receiver, is it 6 wide receivers or 7 with Xavier Smith making this team? Tight end, no questions there. Although we haven't talked about Tyler Higbee. Is he going to come back at any point during this season? No idea. Offensive line, let me save that for last. Defensive line, you got guys like Murchison, Corey Durden, Carlos Watkins, all trying to make this team. Does Murchison go on IR? Does Durden or Watkins make the team? Edge rusher, it's just a matter of Mathis. Is Mathis on this team? If Brennan Jackson is back, maybe not. Maybe O'Shawn Mathis gets bumped. I had Mathis on this roster with Brennan Jackson going on potential IR as well. So not sure what's going on there. Linebacker, we know who the 4 inside linebackers are. Cornerback, is Woods or Wallace going to make this team? I think Cam McCutcheon, Trey Tomlinson, and Sean Jolly look like they're all on the outs. And by the way, Cam Lampkin, I believe, had a hell of a game. And safety, I think we know what that group's going to look like. Jason Taylor misses the cut. Russ East will be on this team along with Cameron Curl, Cameron Kitchens, John Johnson, Quentin Lake, he can play everywhere. And Jalen McCullough, my money's still on McCullough. Special teams, wow. I almost wish we had brought another punter in to push Ethan Evans, and I don't mean in the weight room. And Joshua Carty, man, just get it done, please, please, just get it done. And yes, I saved offensive line for last. This is the most confusing of the groups, obviously. So worst case scenario, it's really not as bad as you might think. McClendon, Jonah Jackson, Steve Avila, Kevin Dotson, and Noteboom could potentially be the starters, with Havenstein and Lyric Jackson out if that comes to pass. Not ideal. Now, the 2 backups that are going to be on this roster for sure at this point, 2 pretty good, potentially pretty good interior players, Logan Bruss and Bo Limmer. So who's the backup tackle? Now you can retain Zach Thomas or AJ Curry. Thomas has graded out really well. Is he more of an interior guy? I don't want to put him at left tackle. And then there's AJ Curry, who has vastly improved, I think, since he's gotten here. But this is a position group the Rams may very well pull someone off the waiver wire to bring in as a backup tackle. But what we really need is for Big Rob to be ready to go Sunday night in Detroit. Now, before we close out here, my players of the game, and this is just passing the eye test, no Pro Football Focus grades taken into account here. My first guy is Xavier Smith, contributed in the run game, in the return game, and in the receiving game, a complete guy. Be really surprised if he's not on this roster. Next up, Fatukasi had a really big stop on that 4th down. It was all over the field. Looked like he had a really good game. Hey, Zach Evans had 2 touchdowns. Let's give him a game ball too. How about that? And the last guy is Cam Lampkin. he seemed to really show, as Sean McVay likes to say, when a guy shows up during the game on tape, something good's happening. And I'm pretty darn sure Cam Lampkin had a good game. I'll be interested to see if the Pro Football Focus grades back that up. And I was going to throw in our linebacker Elias Neal, also played really well, but I think he missed a couple of open field tackles, so I held him back. But he would be my fifth guy, Elias Neal. And by the way, how about Cam Akers? Got to hand it to him. He really showed that he still has it. And, it's a preseason game, but that must have been really important to him, so good for him. And the last thought on the offensive line, I meant to include this earlier. Alaric Jackson, if his ankle is bad, is dinged up, could be kind of a good thing. Gives him time to recuperate and opens up another spot on the roster. They don't have to put him on IR. He's suspended. So for 2 weeks, the Rams get a pass on that 53-man roster and can add another player. Well, enough of the preseason. We'll probably have another drop Monday morning. And then Tuesday night, Paul, Ian, and I will get together to discuss this final 53-man roster. Although, just remember, a 53-man roster, that initial / final 53-man roster isn't really final. There will be some changes as players get waived. Rams will address any remaining holes in the roster. And you know what? Based on the injuries we're seeing along the offensive line and a little bit of questionable depth along the interior defensive line, look for some moves to be made after this 53-man roster is announced. And then we'll see how the Rams populate that practice squad. I think we have a lot of guys on this team that we watched play against the Texans that are going to end up on this practice squad for sure. That's going to do it for this episode. Remember, you can reach us at ramsuppodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget about our YouTube channel. Our handle is at laramsup.com. Till next time, keep the horns up, stay safe, and have fun out there.